I think this show has started. Good evening, afternoon, good night for some of you. It's 12 o'clock here in Iceland. They just changed the time there in the US. We have different time zones. We just keep our time here in Iceland always the same, and this is why it is easy. But as you may be able to tell, I'm back at home, back in Iceland. And soon it will be light enough outside in the evening to actually do evening tours, so that we are looking forward to that. Virtual tours on the go, sort of half real, at least for me, since I'll be doing the tours actually. But tonight we are heading far away. Like usually, we are going to be covering somewhere in the vicinity of 350 miles. We're going to do it all in 1 hour if we are lucky. If we can't, we will just stop and then continue next Wednesday, because this is what we do on Wednesdays. We go on virtual tours, and Uniquely Iceland will continue this until you can possibly come here to Iceland and do this by yourself in reality. But right now, I think it is time to start the tour. We are going to Snæfellsnes. Snæfellsnes is definitely one of my favorite places. I was born in Snæfellsnes and raised there, so I know a little bit about the place. But this is basically how it would look like if we were starting our tour as it is. 12 o'clock at night, heading into the darkness, into the snow. Well, we haven't got snow right now here in Reykjavik anyway, but elsewhere in Iceland, they may have this type of weather. But since this is a virtual tour, we can use the magic of technology and change the time, change the seasons even. And the pictures that I'm going to be using are from different parts of the year. So we are out of Reykjavik, and of course we have to go through this little town on the way. We are heading on Highway 1, the ring road, and you can't really get anywhere out of Reykjavik unless you're going to Keflavik. Otherwise, you would be you have to use the ring road, and it takes you right through this little town called Mosfellsbær. I mentioned Mosfellsbær many times, and people that have been to Iceland, they know it is quite close to Reykjavik. But as we leave Mosfellsbær, we are basically out of the greater Reykjavik area. And this is what we plan to do. We are going to, this Snæfellsnes is the peninsula that stretches to the west, above Reykjavik, in between Reykjavik and Snæfellsnes is Faxaflói, and that is the bay. And we are heading all the way around the peninsula, and as we're going to Stykkishólmur, and then we're going to backtrack a little bit and go across the peninsula and head back. Actually, the tour will sort of end here at the junction here as we come back, because otherwise I would have to repeat everything again. So, as we come out of Mosfellsbær, we drive into a little fjord. It's actually a small inlet, but big enough to be called a fjord. It's called Kollafjörður. And Kollafjörður takes us, comes in right at the root of this mountain that is constantly in view from Reykjavik, called Esja. So these are the beginning of the slopes of Esja that you see here to the right, where people go for walks all the time. Several, lots of people that almost go here daily in all kinds of weather, whether it's winter or summer. They will head up to Esja. And I've mentioned this also before, that it is easy to get to Esja, even if you are a traveler, a guest here in Iceland, and you don't have a car, because all the yellow buses of Reykjavik, they will run up to Esja quite frequently. Esja, in fact, belongs to Reykjavik, and so does this little village that you see here at the top of the picture. And that one is called Kjalarnes, this little village here. This is the sort of western part of Esja here to the right. Kjalarnes is a very famous place. It is the home of the oldest local parliament. You see, when you visit Iceland, you will for sure visit Þingvellir, which is, you are told, is the oldest parliament site in Iceland. But actually, that national parliament was established in the year 930. And prior to that, they sort of kept the system that they had in Norway by meeting locally. That didn't work for Iceland, and this is why they established the National Assembly. But before that time, they had these little things, these little assemblies, local assemblies. And Ingólfur Arnarson, who is still said to be the first settler of Iceland, and he settled in Reykjavik, he conducted his assembly meetings there at Kjalarnes. So this is the very, very oldest parliament site in Iceland, Kjalarnes, Keelnes. That would Ness, obviously a peninsula, and Keel, as in the keel of a boat, because there's a mountain here further out on this little peninsula, which looks like a keel of a boat that has been turned upside down. You'll recognize this if you were to drive this sometimes. But ahead of us lies the Highway 1, and there's a fjord up here called Hvalfjörður, the Whale Fjord. The Whale Fjord, the Highway 1 used to take us around the Whale Fjord, and it was quite a lengthy drive. Takes almost an hour at times to drive around the fjord. And it is a beautiful drive though, but you don't have to do that anymore because there's a tunnel actually that takes you here behind this mountain and across. But the Whale Fjord is well worth for you to actually drive the fjord because it's so beautiful. So many times I have driven around this fjord with people from the States and from the UK, and if they are getting on, there are fewer of them now, I have to admit, but there are people still around that'll tell you that I have never been to Iceland, they say. I've never been to Iceland, but I have been to the Whale Fjord. And the reason is that during the Second World War, all the ships coming from the east coast of the United States, bringing provisions for the Allies, they would congregate. They would get together in the Whale Fjord. And from there, they would make a huge convoy over to Britain, usually, sometimes all the way up to Russia. And so these people that I have traveled with me and told me that they were on the Whale Fjord, they're not in Iceland, meant that they were on one of those ships. Some of them might have been battleships, others are just freighters, but this was a very, very dangerous journey to make. And they still remember having been here. So rather than going around the fjord this time, we are going to drive underneath the sea and into the tunnel. It's not that long at all, you know, it's about 3 miles, if that. But this tunnel was actually dug and operated by a private company until quite recently. It took them, they were incredibly quick to drill the soil and the rock underneath the ocean, and they fully expected to encounter some water as they got underneath the fjord. But the further they got underneath it, the drier it got. And not only that, it was the heat in there was incredible. They couldn't understand it. So as they sort of investigated it further, they found out that they had totally underestimated the insulation power of the thin layer of clay at the bottom of the fjord, which totally insulated the rock below. It wouldn't let any water through, and it had actually preserved the heat from the original lava that flowed there about 6 million years ago. Imagine that. Oh, this is how they explained it anyway. It's only going to take us a few minutes to drive underneath the fjord, and as we come out on the other side, we'll have this mountain in view. This mountain is called Akrafjall, Acre Mountain. And since all these names of mountains and places were given about more than 1,000 years ago, they are also an indication of what was special about the place and what life was like in a way more than 1,000 years ago. Acre in Icelandic means a field, usually a field of barley or rye or something like so, some kind of a cereal. In fact, they were able to grow cereals in Iceland more than 1,000 years ago, before the small ice age or the little ice age started in about in the 14th century actually. And this meant that this mountain, probably around it somewhere, they had acres, which has become a measuring unit in English now. But it used to mean just a field of some kind of cereals. So we came out about here from the tunnel, and we are going to drive this way around the Akrafjall, Acre Mountain. A little bit further on here to the left, we can't see it, there's a village called Akranes, one of those fishing villages. And as we come around the mountain, we have this beautiful thing in view. I say beautiful because it isn't really not. It is actually an aluminum factory and a steel smelting factory. Iceland is producing tremendous amount of energy from the hydro power plants that we have in the highlands, and it is we only use about 20% of it by ourselves. So the rest we sell to energy demanding industries like aluminium factories. And we have 3 large ones around the country. One, of course, in Reykjavik. As you come into Reykjavik, you drive past one. One is in the East Fjord, and then there is this one. And the energy demanding industries obviously finding it quite convenient that Iceland needs to get rid of its extra energy. But a lot of people have wondered why we have chosen to basically use it to change one base material into another base material. And it needs a lot of energy. The bauxite that is brought in all the way from Australia, South Africa, has to be shipped all the way over here to the north. And then it is exported or shipped back once we have melted it down into aluminium. And this is what people find strange, that we are changing Icelandic nature really in order to harvest the energy of the waterfalls and the rivers up in the highland for such a base purpose. But that may change, we don't know. So as we pass the Grundartangi, which the plant is called, we come around the mountain, and there is another mountain in the distance. This one here called Hafnarfjall. This is actually a mountain ridge, and it's quite strange that as you drive past this mountain, which you are not on the mountain at all, we are just below it on a very safe ground, supposedly. But this is one of the most treacherous highways in Iceland. Most of the, for the reason that there is a weather phenomenon. It's kind of a swirlwind that runs around the mountain. And when it is slippery outside and a lot of wind, cars on the road are known to be blown off the road, caused by this strange natural phenomenon of wind. And as you drive past the mountain, you will see how smooth it is. It's actually very smooth. Most of the mountains in Iceland are rugged and look like volcanic mountains. This one looks like just a heap of gravel. So this one is called Hafnarfjall. And we are now quite well on our way. We are about 50 kilometers from Reykjavik. And as we, Hafnarfjall here in the background, and now we need to cross the fjord, which is called Borgarfjörður, Borgfjord, and there's a bridge over here. And we come to this little village, which is called Borgarnes. And now we are actually closing in on Snæfellsnes itself. I tell you, Borgarnes was first, as a sample, where I was born, on Snæfellsnes, actually on a farm. We will be passing the farm, so I will show you later on. But this was the first town I ever came to. Came here with my granddad. He was selling the wool to the co-op. And the first time I tasted sort of hard sugar candy was in this town. This is what I remember it for all the time. There's a bridge that crosses from Borgarnes over to the other side. Otherwise, you would have had to drive all the way into the fjord and around it to get to Borgarnes and continue on Highway 1. So this bridge here was a tremendous improvement, actually. There's a funny story that they tell about this bridge. It was actually built for the most part by the farmers here in the countryside and then around Borgarnes. They appreciated the work, farmers that came to do the construction. So when they were about to finish the bridge, the people from Reykjavik came from the telephone company and the electric company and said, so where are we going to put the lines? There was supposed to be like a compartment within the bridge where we are going to take our electric and telephone lines through. And they said, well, we have closed them off. We didn't know what they were for. So they broke them up, and then they started trying to stick the lines through this narrow opening, and they couldn't do it. So they were about to break the whole thing up and just lay it in there when one of the farmers said, well, maybe I have a way to get the lines through. He went back to the farm and he fetched a mink. Mink farming was once quite big in Iceland for a short period of time, around the time when the bridge was built, actually. So this farmer, he had a mink on his farm, and he brought one of them, and then he tied a string to the tail of the mink and put it through the narrow opening of the shaft that was supposed to house the electric lines and the telephone lines. And sure enough, the line was long enough, the mink just had it in, and in 10 minutes it was out on the other side. And this meant that they could thread a thicker cable through, and then finally a sturdy cable, and then tie finally a hefty rope to the lines and pull them through. So that was quite ingenious for the farmer, and saved them a lot of trouble. Also here in Borgarnes, we have now a historic museum, or a history museum. It's not historic, it's a history museum. It's basically a museum that is devoted to the Icelandic sagas. And there's one saga, we are back in saga country anyway, here. And there's this one saga that they tell quite nicely. And that is the saga of, of Egill Skallagrímsson and his lot, this Egil saga. And they do it quite nicely. They have these, it's almost like a wax museum, and you come there and you are given some, well, kids have fun there too, because they can dress up as Vikings from the time, and adults as well. So there's something for them if they aren't ready to take an hour-long tour of the museum and listen to the guide. Actually, it's in earphones, that it's not a live guiding. that goes on there. But all kinds of interesting stories, and pretty lifelike too. The Saga Museum in Borgarnes. As we drive out of Borgarnes, we come to the farm, which actually the fjord, the town, is named after. It is called Borg. Borg, of course, it's an Indo-Germanic word that means city or citadel, even Burg. But here in Iceland, it usually meant just something that looked like a medieval city, maybe from afar, and referred mostly to the rock formations that we have. Anyway, this one is called Borg, and it is a very famous farm from the Icelandic sagas, for it was the home of this fella here, Egill Skallagrimsson, who is probably the most famous Viking that has lived in Iceland, for he came over with his grandfather and father, Skallagrimur, and he was not just a very wild Viking, he was a marvelous poet as well, and this is why Icelanders love him. But the guy that wrote his story, his name was Snorri Sturluson, and this guy, he lived there as well for a while at Borg. He was a social climber, and he became the lawman of Icelandic National Assembly twice, in fact, the only position that was elected, that the Vikings elected to. The other positions were somehow, well, people inherited them more than anything else. But the lawman was the highest position that you could have in Iceland. And even though that he was not a nobleman, he was not born a nobleman, he has become the most revered scholar and writers of old Iceland. And sometimes I'm going to have to do a special about Snorri Sturluson, that's his name. Actually, this statue stands in Reykholt, the place where he moved into, which is about 30-40 kilometers from Borgarnes and Borg, where he lived. But Egill Skallagrimsson, he was so famous that when Icelanders began to sculpture things, they looked for material in the sagas, and this sculpture stands in front of the farm and the church at Borg. You can see Hafnarfjall, the mountain I spoke of earlier, there in the background, and the little town of Borgarnes. And this is supposed to, it's a cubic style artwork. And it's actually supposed to depict an incident in Egil's saga, where Egill has lost his son, his young son is dead, and he's grieving. Actually, he has decided to leave this world. He refuses to take food. And his daughter, being crafty and also knowing her father, she tricks him to have a glass of milk. He's lying in his bed, and she brings the glass of milk to him and asks him to take the drink. He says, no, doom and gloom all over. And then she sips the milk and say, well, no matter, it is sour anyway. And he says, it's new, isn't it? Yes. Well, we don't produce sour milk here at Borg, he says, and took this sip of the glass, and it wasn't sour, of course. And but she got him on his feet again. Egill Skallagrimsson, Egil Saga. It is actually available in English. You should and on the internet. So you should see if you can find it and read about Egill. He had many adventures, and if you want to know something sort of quintessential about the Viking Age, that would be the saga to read. As we drive on to Mýrar, the Myers, it's a rather long way to go because now we are coming into to Snæfellsnes proper. And there is a crater there on the way that obviously fascinated not just modern tourists or visitors to Iceland, but when it was a rarity that people came to Iceland, they were fascinated by this crater, which is called Eldborg, the Fireberg, or the Fireborg. And it is a crater, a marvelous crater, and you can drive right up to it almost if you have the time. It's a bit of away from the road, but and then as you can see, there's a path here, and you can walk into the crater. What is amazing about this crater, they are not sure what kind of a crater this really is. It seems like a crater that has had lava coming out of it, but the lava seems to have covered the ground around it, coming from somewhere else. So for a long time it was thought of as a pseudo crater, which is basically a vent of something. But I've never come across a proper explanation of how this one was formed. But I'm told that it is quite a rarity. And from the road, this is from the road. You see the crater from the road. It's quite a distance, but you can get to it quite easily. Eldborg, it's called. It's a beautiful name. And there's a farm that stands right close to it, that is also very picturesque up, you know, in front of this beautiful crater. On we drive, and now we are approaching my territory. But first, we're going to stop at Gerðuberg. This is, in many places, you will find this type of, these basalt columns in Iceland. And probably the best known basalt columns are on the Black Beach, Reynisfjara, on the south of Iceland. But this is a very nice place to visit as well. You don't have to spend long there, but it is worth visiting just to get a picture of this, what really does look like a fortified city. If you look at it, it looks like a fortified city. It could be Jerusalem, medieval city somewhere in Europe or in the Middle East. But the basalt columns, they are very iconic for Iceland. And Mr. Samuelsson, who was the greatest architect, or possibly the best architect of the last century, he was the architect, the state architect for a long time, and many of the buildings that are the best looking buildings in Reykjavik, I would say, like the National Theatre and the University and Hallgrímskirkja, the church. This is where Samuelsson tried to incorporate something really iconically Icelandic into his architecture. And this is why he used these columns. You will see that in his work where he is trying to emulate these basalt columns that are found in so many places. As we drive a little further on, we come up on this beautiful mountain. I had it in front of my eyes every morning. I woke up when I was a kid, and it is called Hafursfjall, or Buck Mountain, as in goat buck. And I don't know if I can show you to you. It would be nice to be there in real life, but as you trace the mountain here, there is like a crescent of mountain, and it was against this crescent where I was born. I wasn't born there, but this is where my great-granddad lived. This is actually a turf house, and my great-granddad, he lived in this house the grandfather of my mother, that is. And this is how houses would look in Iceland no more than 100 years ago. My grandfather, on my mother's side as well, he married the daughter of my great-granddad, and she became my grandmother. And my grandfather moved to this site, and he thought that this was not good. So he built a house. He built this house, and he turned the house that his in-laws had lived in into a chicken shed, as like you see here. And he built this little wooden house there, and it was inside this house I was born many, many years ago. But this house didn't stand long because it actually burned down, and shortly after I was born, and the family went into the chicken shed for the night, and then we had to be dispersed to the different farms around here, while my granddad, with the help of my father, of course, because my mother and my father were together at the time, he was there, and they built this house, which is still standing. This is a stone house. I'm trying to show you this. I'm showing you this to try to explain to you that it is very short time actually since Iceland rose out of the medieval times. We lived in torf houses 100 years ago. We lived in the ground almost. And my grandfather, he was a man of two ages, really. He lived in a turf house. He tried to rebuild the turf house that my great-granddad lived in. He built a wooden house, which came afterwards. You will see, like in Eyrarbakki and Stokkseyri and other smaller towns on the south coast, that they still have houses from the time when we used to build out of wood. And then he built one finally out of concrete and stone. This is Hafursfell hérna, in the back, and the little farm here on the right side, which is called Svarfhóll. This is my brother Gummi and myself on a tractor that has just been bought new. This is how we looked like when we were just starting out at the farm. This is Gummi today, my brother. He's my oldest brother, but I have a lot of siblings. Today, actually, my granddad, he sold the farm and we all left, and now this guy is being trained at the farm. Actually, it is a training center for the Icelandic dog. The Icelandic dog was almost extinct. It was saved by a British guy who came here in the 1960s and took what dogs he could find that were still around. The Icelanders didn't really care for them much. And he took them to Florida and then back to Britain. And then they were reintroduced into Iceland. And today they are valued. And Kleifarvellir, where I was born, is kind of an official training ground for the Icelandic dog, which I like because I used to have a Icelandic dog whose name was Spori. Well, it was a dog that belonged to the farm, but I thought of it as mine. My family. I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. These are my grandparents that lived there. And this is my mother, and this is my dad. Gummi here, being confirmed. I have an older sister, Sippa, who lives in Ísafjörður. Anyway, and this is the local church in the Shire. My parents and my grandparents, they are buried here in the small churchyard around the church. This is where the lot was baptized before we all moved from the countryside over to Keflavík around 1960. But it's a small, very local and typical country church. So as we go on, we have a beautiful view to the mountain range that stretches along the peninsula. This one is actually called Skýrtunna, Skyr barrel, Skyr being the strange Icelandic yogurt, Skyr, and this is the barrel of Skyr. And from the barrel of Skyr, if you were to climb up there, you have a beautiful view to Ljósafjall, the Ljósafjall, the light, or light mountains because of their color. It's very light. So as we drive, you have this beautiful mountainside on your right side, and the Atlantic Ocean and Faxaflói on the left side. Sometimes you can't see the ocean because you're just too low down. But as soon as you get up into the mountains, if you were to take a little walk, you will have a beautiful view. Now we come to a junction. So we could choose to either go straight on. This is called vegamót, which means crossroads. It's a nice, and or where the roads meet, the junction. We could go straight on, which we are going to do, or we could actually cross the peninsula here and get on to the northern side of it. But since we are coming this way, we will forego it for now. This is a place where you could easily stop. It would be timely to stop if you didn't stop in Borgarnes and get a cup of coffee or some refreshment. A place that is sort of one of the oldest road shops that we still have. It has been maintained quite nicely, but on we go. So here we were here, vegamót. We are going to drive all along the coastline here, all the way over here. And here we come to another junction, and we could go over the mountain. This is a mountain road, quite difficult to travel at times, especially in the winter time. But we will not do that because we are going to continue along the coastline and around this mountain that we will soon have in a view. We actually probably have it in a view from here, but it gets bigger, called Snæfellsnes. We're going to go all the way around the peninsula, and then we will come this way back here. So we have a long way to go still. As we get off into the, continue, we might want to stop at this little farm here. It's called Ölkelda, and it takes its name from this messy ground here. And the water that comes out of this this faucet there. Ölkelda, öl means actually beer, or not really beer, but a drink that is different from water. And this is what is different is this is natural and carbonized natural mineral water. You can't drink very much of it, but they say that if you take like a teaspoon a day, that's good for you. A lot of people come there and fill their flasks of it, and it turns red and muddy in just a few minutes, actually. But this is said to do wonders for your health if you take it regularly. But I guess it's full of minerals and good stuff. As you drive on, you come to yet another farm, and this one is right by the sea. You have to take a little turn there to the left and head down towards the coastline, and you come to this beautiful farm that's called Idritunga, and from there you have usually you can spot some seals. Well, they like to bask there in the sun. And even in the wintertime, I've come there in the wintertime, and you still see them about. They find it quite safe here. Snæfellsnes was known in the past to be one of the parts of the country which probably was the most populated part of the land as well, because it is a peninsula stretches into the sea, and on both sides of the peninsula you have access to the ocean and the food that the ocean can provide, not the least the seals and whales that used to drift ashore. Dead usually. We had one just recently in Reykjanes that drifted, a big whale that they say was becoming dangerous because it was going to explode from the gases formed within it. But usually on our way here, we will stop here at Idritunga and see if we can watch the seals for a while. And by now we have a beautiful view anyway up to the Snæfellsjökull. But this is how long we have traveled. This is Reykjavik here, and we have gone all this way, and we are sort of in the middle of the peninsula right now. And our next stop is going to be at Hotel Búðir, which is also a very famous place. Hotel Búðir is in fact a hotel, yes, but Búðir means a shop or a booth. And those booths were not Icelandic booths, they were actually Danish booths. The Danes monopolized all the trading in Iceland for many centuries, and they established themselves here, the Danish merchants, and everybody was obliged by law to deal with he was assigned a merchant actually, and you couldn't even change merchant. Even if it was more convenient to deal with somebody else, you had to go to the one that was assigned to you. And luckily, actually, Snæfellsnes had a couple of them on both sides of the peninsula. And but the hotel is good, fine, interesting, but what people find most interesting about this place is to walk around the beaches, which are amazing over here. They also have this nice black country church, one of the older ones in the area, and very popular actually for people to come, even from Reykjavik, and get married in this church. Sort of invoke the spirit of the land at the same time. Nice place to visit Búðir. And if you have a mind to stay for a night on the peninsula, Búðir wouldn't be a bad place to do so at the hotel. As you come from Búðir, you have this interesting mountain lava field. There's a big lava field here, as you can see. And this one is called Bárðarbunga. It's actually named after Bárður, who is said to be the guardian, the protective spirit of the whole peninsula. He was part giant and part troll, actually, and part human. He had all kinds of interesting bloodlines running in him, and he had trouble staying amongst humans anyway, and went to the mountain that we called Snæfellsjökull and lived there, but would come around times to help out because he hadn't completely left humanity behind. Anyway, this one is Bárðarbunga, and people often swear on it. I think that gives them good luck if they manage to swear on Bárðarbunga. But as we head up the mountain, because we need to go over the shoulder of the mountain, Búðir is somewhere around here to the right, we need to go back and drive above this little farm, which has a very dark history actually. It is on the shoulder of a mountain, and it's called the shoulder and Öxl. And it is famous for being the home of the only really well-known serial killer in Iceland. Not a recent one. We haven't had any recent serial killer in Iceland, but it was a 17th century man, and he lured travelers into his home, promised to give them a shelter over the night, and they would check in and never check out. He would kill them and rob them. And his son was in on it, but they were both executed for their crimes in the end. By the time he had killed at least 18 people. But as you come across over the shoulder, you have this brilliant mountain in view, Snæfellsjökull. It is a mystical mountain. Not only does Bárður live there, the protecting spirit of the area, but it is by many people believed to be endowed with special powers. People have said that it is on a ley line. People have said that it is one of the 7 impulses of the Gaia that are alive and emitting, radiating power. People have come here to not just take in the fresh air, but to be actually influenced by this mountain, spiritually awakened by the mountain. I can see how that can happen, you know, even if you are not a believer in spirits, this mountain has an effect on you. And it is easily accessible. There are caves in the mountains here that people like to visit. And in the wintertime, it is marvelous. And in the summertime too, they actually do organize tours for you on snowmobiles to go all the way up here into the mountain. The mountain is a crater. This is all lava fields around here. And it has a slab of ice on the top of it. It was for a very long time thought to be the highest mountain in Iceland, which it is not. It's actually the 17th highest or something like that. But because it's so highly visible from so many places, it was thought to be the highest one. And it was one of those mountains that people take instant notice of. It became world famous for a while anyway, not just in modern times, but in the past time, because it was used in the first real science fiction that was ever written in the world. It was Jules Verne that wrote Journey to the Center of the Earth. And in order to get to the center of the Earth, you need to go up to the top here and get down here into a cave and then find your way to the center of the Earth. This is what happens in the story that Jules Verne wrote, what, more than 100 years ago. So, very special mountain, and we will have that in view now for a long time because we are going to be driving around it. Here on the left side, we come to a beautiful place called Arnarstapi. This is a little mountain here. It is right below it. And this is how it looks, the scenery looks from Arnarstapi. It's actually a village and with a small harbor, and I'm not sure if I got the village. The village is not the important thing here. It is a place where you can get refreshments if you need to stop. But look at this coastline here. It is absolutely gorgeous. And you know, you would stop here and walk along the coastline no matter what. Whatever the weather, because it's so beautiful. It has these wonderful rock formations. It has holes in the ground. You can actually peek down the hole and you see the birds here in the nesting on the sills, the kittiwakes that need just a little space in order to lay their eggs. And the kissing trolls. And different colored seawater with the flowers, and the mountains of Snæfellsnes here in the background. Here you could easily spend the day if the weather was good, just looking around and enjoying the. Just around the corner here, we have left Arnarstapi now, Arnarstapi, the Eagle Cape, and we are just a little further and we come to this place called Hellmar. It has also wonderful rock formation and has a very, very small restaurant that is on the beach that prides itself in their fish soup. As we leave Hellmar, we have yet another famous place, Lóndrangar they are called. This actually looks like a Viking ship under full sail that is ready to leave. Many good pictures that are better than this one. Oh yeah, here we go. That actually, Icelanders love to see things in the rocks. Different images out of things, faces and houses and abodes everywhere. All made out of lava rocks. Lóndrangar, and of course from this side the glaciers looks a little smaller. It is getting smaller like all glaciers in Iceland, but still hanging on there. But you can see the lava fields here, lava floating down from the crater on the top of the mountain. It's been a while since Snæfellsjökull erupted, but it is still considered a live volcano. Now we are still a little further on, and there is now we can get onto the beach, and this one is called Djúpalónssandur, the deep lagoon sand, and again it is the rock formation, the lava rock, and the beach and the ocean that is the attraction. Here you can also spend quite some time in, especially if the weather was good. And see these stones here? These are stones that you are supposed to try to lift. It's called Auli, Amlóði, Sterkur og Fullsterkur. Means just you're terrible, Auli. You're an imbecile. And this one, if you can't lift this one, you are a little better. And then there's a strong one and fully strong. And people actually come here to try to lift these stones. The landscape, the seascape is tremendous here, absolutely fabulous. And the beach is sprinkled with sand and debris from boats that have smashed up here against the rocks. We leave Djúpalónssandur and we come to this building here. It is not far from a village called Sandur, but it is, where was I? Can't believe it, the name just escaped me. But it has a mast here, which is used to be, for a little while, the tallest man-made structure in Europe. It was quickly surpassed by a structure made by the Russians, but this was actually a military Loran mast. Used to be good in the 60s and the 70s. But today this has been taken over, the facility here, by the rescue squadrons of Iceland. They use this as a training center or facility. And the mast has ceased to be a Loran mast, but it is still used for broadcasting companies in Iceland. And on the other side of the road, we have these strange things. They're called they were actually built 600-700 years ago, some of them. One of the oldest man-made structures in Iceland that are still more or less intact, but they were made to store fish in. And they're easily missed on the road there. Fiskbyrgi, we call them. But just fish storage places. The fish was either dried or salted, probably dried, and once it had dried, it was stored in there. High enough away from the sea, so that the fish fly couldn't get in it, because it can't live in a greater height than 12 meters, greater elevation. But this is the little village that is close by, called Sandur. And now we have 3-4 villages here on the tip of the peninsula, all building their existence up on the fishing industry, being close to the fishing grounds, the wealthy fishing grounds around the peninsula. So this is Sandur, Hellissandur. Then we have yet another one called Rif, or Reeves. And as we drive on and around, you can see the glacier here in the background. We are getting around it now, we are turning. We can come to this one called Ólafsvík, where my father was actually born, and my grandparents on my father's side lived for a while before they moved across the fjord, across the bay, and over to Garður in Reykjanes. So this is quite a thriving fishing village as well. And we drive through Ólafsvík. This is still Ólafsvík here, as you can see from the other direction. And we come to Kirkjufell, the most photographed mountain in Iceland, and probably now the most famous mountain in Iceland, because it was used in the Game of Thrones series. This was the arrow-tipped mountain that features in those very popular television shows. And people come here. Some people they don't want anything but this mountain, the arrow-headed mountain, and they will stay for days in order to catch the northern lights above them. And you need to do that sometimes, because the northern lights in the wintertime, you cannot control them. You have to be patient. There's a beautiful waterfall close by, and the trick is to get the waterfall and the mountain in like this at the same time. You get a beautiful picture. Kirkjufell and this nearby waterfall. But there is a town close by. It's called Grundarfjörður. Looks like this. And there is if you were on your way, each of these towns have stores and facilities, everything to make a town really. But this one has a combination of a kind of a small folk museum, a coffee house, and a library, all sort of put into one. A nice place to stop and have a cup of coffee or chocolate or tea. But we don't have time, and we are quickly running out of it, and we need to get going. We come to this little fjord on our way back. We are now sort of on the Breiðafjörður side. There is another bay on the other side of the northern side of the peninsula called Breiðafjörður. And one of the fjord that comes out of it is this one called Kolgrafafjörður. It's a very narrow fjord, and there's a bridge over it. But a couple of times in the beginning of this century, something really weird happened. Huge shoals of herring came swimming into the fjord, underneath the bridge, and got stuck inside the shallows of the fjord there. And it was thought that perhaps the fish was driven in there by the whales that followed, the killer whales that gorged themselves. Actually, everybody was there, you know, all the birds in the area, they came there because eventually the fish just died from the lack of oxygen. But now it is thought that they were basically seeking colder water, cold water that was brought forth and fresher water by the many rivers that fall into the fjord. And as we leave Kolgrafafjörður, we come into maybe the most beautiful country site or the shire of them all, Helgafellssveit. Look at the mountains, the colors of them, highly all volcanically formed, of course, and this beautiful lava, probably the most rugged lava that we still have in Iceland, and it is more or less untouched, although that they have built a couple of roads through it, called Berserkjahraun, the berserk lava. But the colors of the mountains and the whole area is fabulous, beautiful. And it is not worse if it is a little wet, if it rains just a little bit, because the colors will sharpen on your pictures. This is how the lava, the moss that grows on the lava, the moss is attracted to the warm lava almost immediately after it solidifies. It only takes a few months for the first month or moss to start growing on the lava fields. And then it gets thicker and thicker. Oh, this is nothing. But just a little away from the road, there's a beautiful place called Bjarnarhöfn, and this is where they actually produce the infamous Icelandic fermented shark, probably the most famous one in the land. This is how it looks. They don't bury it in the ground anymore, they hang it up. There's the shark. Can't talk much about the shark now. I could talk about it for some time, but not now. We have short time to go and yet a distance to do. We are still in Helgafellssveit, and I just threw in quite a lot of pictures there because I love it so much over there. And there is Helgafell, one of the holy fells. We have 7 or 8 of them in Iceland called Helgafell, or the Holy Fell. And this one probably was devoted to one of the older gods in the beginning. And because the man who named it the Holy Helgafell, he said that he and his forefathers and his ancestors would all reside in this mountain. So it was a kind of a burial site, spiritual burial site in a way. There are quite a few of them in Iceland. And then we find the biggest town in Snæfellsnes. It's called Stykkishólmur. Now, if you were going to visit the Westfjord, the best thing would be to drive here and then take the ferry from Stykkishólmur across Breiðafjörður to Brjánslækur, which is just a harbor basically on the other side. But this saves you quite a bit of driving anyway, and time depending on your driving skills. There are things of interest in Stykkishólmur, of course, and maybe, oops, not this one. We're heading out of Stykkishólmur. The place worth visiting there is absolutely the church. Architects in Iceland, they don't have much leeway when they design things, but they go wild on the churches, and the church in Stykkishólmur is quite an artwork. Again, we are heading away from Stykkishólmur, and we are going to try to get across the peninsula. And as we do, we will have to stop because there's one view after another of beautiful colors, beautiful mountains, beautiful water, lakes and rivers and waterfalls, and everything is so easy to get to. You just have to stop the car and get out, but make sure that you stop where you're safe. And if we are lucky on the way back, and if it is dark, and if it is this time of the year, this is what you may be able to see. Iceland, still the best country in the world to see the Northern Lights. It's so easy to get here from most parts of the world. And the land is located just perfectly in order to see the Aurora Borealis that graces our sky in the wintertime. Well, we are across to Vegamót again, and we have done it, guys, in about an hour. A tour that usually would take about 9-10 hours to do. We have done it quite reasonably in 1 hour. And so, of course, I admit it doesn't compare to the real thing, but you would know your route now. You would know your way around after having followed me during the past 66 minutes or so. But next Wednesday we will do another tour, definitely, and I hope that you can join me. That would be nice to come along again, and but until that, keep safe and keep up with Uniquely Iceland. Thank you all for coming along, and goodbye and good night.